Good evening. This is Ronald Allen, managing change through effective communications. Tonight's discussion is we talk past one another. As you know, I'm sure you've experienced, you're speaking with a colleague, someone in a restaurant, certainly family members, and the climate of the conversation is how can I get my point across? How can I speak over? How can I let my audience know how important my point of view is? Well, the immediate counter to that feeling of urgency and needing to dominate the conversation is to be silent. So let's see, how can we get there? How can I share with you some strategies, some purpose, meaning, and most importantly, you achieving your objectives, your outcomes, by being quiet and waiting for the most appropriate time to present what you wish to accomplish, what you wish that others will do. And for those of you in the family domain, get your kids to respond. Where is this conversation coming from? Well, talking with some young business associates, and one had their younger son with them. And what kind of threw me for a loop, because I thought it was kind of rude, if not indifferent, which is what is actually occurring in these times of communication when we try to talk over each other, is the question, what are we going to have for supper? And the child responded, whatever, pizza will do. And you know how the rest of the conversation went. We kind of just went right back to what we were discussing because there was no definitive response. There was no real objective. The child could have actually led us all in that direction to discuss and evaluate what were we going to have to eat and then come back, which is in fact taking control of that conversation for that moment in time. So let's kind of jump right in. Some of the reading I'm going to share with you tonight is taken from the following studies. Charles Brown and Van Riper Charles. This is control speech, right? Control speech. What are we saying? When are we delivering it? And in what manner are we delivering it? Another research report, which I've had to study a little bit for this, is Roger Brown and Words and Things, an Introduction to Language. Words and things. So think about your last conversation with someone. What words were chosen and what things were introduced, and in some cases, which I really found interesting in this study, what is left out, right? By omission, for example, in the legal world, in financial world, disclosure, right? With engagement, with social psychology, it's all about why didn't they say something in a certain manner? How was the argument positioned, right? Another piece of research, the language of social control. The language of social control. And once again, the ability to remain silent, the ability to allow the other person to exhaust everything they feel they have to express, literally pulls the conversation in your favor. Because once they've expressed everything and they've exhausted, what more can they say? Now, there is another level to that, by the way, and that's really cool and interesting. And then, of course, oh, by the way, the language of social control is written by Hayakawa. This is 1964, Hayakawa. And this was actually published in New York, Hardcourt, Brace, and World. That's the publishing company. And then Irving Lee, They Talk Past Each Other, which is exactly my title today. We talk past one another. So why is that? What is the psychology that's going on within us? What's that urge that we feel we need to get out quickly and say what we need? Do we really think by being the first person to speak, we actually win the conversation? Do we actually get the other person to believe? Because that's one significant aspect of communications. Does the opposition believe? In our current economic climate, we know that there's hard lines. And within each of those groups, there are subgroups, tertiary, secondary, tertiary, and even fourth level believers who strip away the initial intent. And what we find is that it becomes highly diluted. So, you know, my position with the youth, I think because their minds are not fully programmed, we can better engage them and give them, when I say the right perspective, the perspective of discovery, the perspective of validation, the perspective of quantify, qualify what you believe, at least for that moment in time. Because before, much of the conversation up until the 90s was, this is absolute. Well, we know that's not true. Why? Because of the level of knowledge. Why? Because of the level of experience. Why? Because those of us who have hit my age know that there's so much more still to learn. And certainly in the area of communications, moreover, with different cultures, such as India, Pakistan, the continent of Africa, the countries of Latin America. Each country has different mores. Within each group, each country, there are different tribes. I'll use that term, different tribes. And so we must, if we want to win them over, be respectful, mindful, learn a little bit about them, give them that respect, and embrace them in our conversations. That, by the way, is change management. Peter Drucker talked about it 50 years ago. Edward Deming, in going into being requested twice by the Emperor of Japan after we dropped the nuclear bombs on Japan. He was invited into the highest courts of Japan to help rebuild their industry. So this is not light, this is not trite, this is not simple. It is a long-term strategy of beginning to realize what your past behavior in communications was like, what were the results, to what degree, right, when we talk about change management and project management, to what degree were those processes and services and outcomes achieved? How many of the population did we win over, right? We can use that term. We won them over because we gave them something that they can identify with, they can use. And then execution and, of course, sustainability. So when you say something to your younger members of your family, do they believe it because you're the parent? Because in management, because you have title, because you have the threat of holding their careers back? I've always said about the sexual harassment education and federal mandate to have sexual education. It's humcus bumpkus. Why? Because we've allowed people of the highest socially recognized categories to abuse both our young, our women, and now more and more men are coming out for women who are in high positions and are just duplicating the same behavior, by the way. It's nothing unique. It's not like women are getting back. We're programmed. And once they hit that level, they think in order to keep people in place, in order to hone their control, that's their way of and purpose. So to me, the sexual harassment, even at the federal level, which by the way has been around forever, okay? Make no mistake about it. This mandate on sexual harassment training is specious. You have to take the individual that's in the preferred, privileged position. You have to take that person out if they are causing that kind of unrest, insecurity with the whole organization. Because there's always someone else that can bring that level of revenue into a corporation. So I won't say any more about that because otherwise we'll spend the whole day, the whole discussion. So when we talk about, we're talking past one another, let's use some examples that you can identify with. The last time you spoke with a group of employees in the cafeteria, and you're all talking about, let's say, a vacation. Let's say it's a project that you are working on, and you're all trying to get your point of view across. How did it go? How did you feel about the engagement? Can you recall at what point your emotional highs got the better of you? Was it that you felt someone else was taking up all the time and other people simply succumbed to that, I won't say bullying, rather manipulation of the conversation? What if you could then interject and say, and confirm, by the way, the gambit is, you know, Bill, you know, Jane, you know, Musakanya, you know, Philippe. I'm just throwing out some names there so they're not too common, right? You make some valid points. Can we agree that other members of this committee, of this group that's all here to produce optimum, desirable, improved, increased or reduced risk, right? Sometimes it's about reducing risk, can also interject and share their thoughts? You can do that with family. You do that with groups. You do that with committees. Are there people in that group that need to be in control? Can we give them that leeway and still rein them in? What if we once again, allowed them to be the first off the gate in expressing their needs and then say, well, let's validate what Ronald is saying. And by the way, that is my whole philosophy behind managing change through effective communications. It's constantly validating what we say, what we believe, how we act. And that's by life's playback to us. What's so beautiful about this position, by the way, is that it is adaptable. It does allow other elements to be added to the mix and then recontextualize what we're doing, how we're doing it, and if it needs to be adjusted, altered, right? Think about a ship leaving harbor, going around the world. It's constantly recalibrating. Think of a piano. You tune, thank you, you tune a piano, and then after you play it vigorously for a period of time, it needs to be retuned. So why not adapt that same protocol, if you will, or behavior to ourselves? When we talk about always learning, the challenge is people say, well, my experience wasn't good, so nix that. I'll just do what I can. I will do the best that I can. That's an excuse, no doubt about it. I will try. The word try is I have an out. So how do I replace that? I replace it by saying, let's use more of the resources around us. Let's use them for shorter iterations, almost like sprints in agile. And let's see what we come up with. Is it on target? Great. Are we slowly scope creep? Okay, so how do we bring it back? You know, Mark had a great idea. We haven't used it. Can we interject that right now? You know, Marsha showed some great research capabilities. I think something in the paper that she wrote and discovered could help us realign our interests. So if you don't have millions of dollars or thousands of dollars to bring in a SaaS system, which I'm fortunate enough to be working with a gentleman in that area, and I won't say too much about that because I have to, I would say, spend a little bit more time with him and learn about this. It's alignment optimization, utilizing a SaaS system. The philosophy, though, we can use immediately. The understanding of even a scratch of that approach, we can use immediately. The other day, I spoke about online learning, and I used Stanford because it has one of the largest libraries and the most resourceful global resources that students want to learn from. Well, if you go through one of those courses, are you not more exposed? Are you not more capable of engaging in the things that you want than if you did not? So are we talking over one another? Even if at first we don't succeed, we have multiple opportunities. We can understand ourselves, understand how we engage with others, watch how we engage with others, and then adjust. Adjust based on the situation. Are you talking to a colleague or management? Are you talking to senior management, executive management? Are you going to speak with municipalities to take care of a city issue? Like in our city, they keep leaving the recycle bin. So you know what I did? My wife has been calling the direct office and only speaking to the frontline employees, those that you can meet in the office. So I decided I wanted to speak to the manager, and I had my calm voice. I approached it nicely. I said I'd love to give a compliment, and I was a little bit circumventive there. Yes, I was. And we have not had the problem in the last month. Now it may fall off, make no mistake about it, right? That niceness, that level of importance, because we're paying our rates just like everybody else, that may fall off. And we have to go back and do what? Reprogram the piano. So don't just feel I've tried, doesn't work, I'm doing it, doesn't work. It's the stamina to stay in the game, stamina to build that muscle. So in the clutches, just like a high performance athlete, you do it in the clutches. When you're angry, when the group is losing its coolness, right? When the family feels upset. So quickly, we walk into any town, USA, and listen to the conversation in the stores. It doesn't matter what store, dollar store to high end. It's almost like we need to dominate the situation in order to get what we want. And that's not necessarily the right use of our energy. Think of it in that fashion. Use of your energy. At the end of the day, are you always exhausted? See, that's, by the way, I just kind of gave away why I do these live chats at about midnight. I know last night it was 1:30. You got me. The point is, I am looking to develop overall, and in discipline and having that stick-to-itiveness, which, by the way, two people from very different worlds had used that word in describing how I react, how I behave, how I engage. So I know it's a real word. I have certainly looked it up. And so I appreciate it. So I take it as mine. I own that. So let's say you're at work, you're talking with family, you're talking with your spouse, and their spouse is a very stubborn kind of person. What if you decided to just agree with them and acted the way you wanted to? How would that phase them? How would that psych them out? Remember, communications is a lot of human psychology, because you're saying one thing, you're acting to complement that, and if the response is not what you want, how are you adjusting? How are you recalibrating your approach? I wrote down some areas from these studies I want to share with you, and let's just kind of walk through them randomly. So quarterly review, right? So how much time, this is what I'm thinking, how much time are you giving to see whether the new approach, a different approach, is working? Quarterly review. The taste of finishing. I will respect myself. What if you found that in your engagement with people, and certainly your children, there was a newfound respect because of the way that you allow the conversation to be ratcheted down? I have a family member, and this lady, wonderful lady, raised 3 great children. One went off to Princeton, graduated, he's a doctor. Another one started a national program, and the third young lady, the child is going to do what, when I say whatever she wants, you know, the science of rebuilding the anatomy of the body with 3D components. That's what she is capable of doing, because she had gone to college. I think she's a year and a half, 2 years ahead of her age group. What if, instead of always barking, you just started to listen to all the non-response of your kids when you do bark at them? This can be for spouses. This certainly can be in the work environment. You know, passive and non-passive, passive-aggressive personalities, the amiable that makes you feel that you're the boss. Here's another one. Life is happening for us, not to us. You may have heard this in a different context completely. Well, in communications, and certainly speaking with people, you'll hear this used in a way that says, I must get what I need out, otherwise no one will hear me, no one will respect me, right? I am, the self-talk is, I am the lowest cog in the wheel. Well, interesting enough, if you're going up a hill, down a hill, or on flat land, that cog changes importance. Think about that, right? And I've ridden bikes all my life, and I just, right now, I don't remember, but I know when you have the large cog, it's for either flat land, and then the small cog is when you're going uphill. So be careful. Don't be quick to look at the physical and subscribe a less than important role given the application, given the existing application. So if you're going up the hill, the small cog, because you're pedaling quickly, I believe that's the case, is required. If you're on flat land or going down, you want the big cog. Just thought about that. 5 pieces that shape strategy. 5 pieces that shape strategy. Okay, 5 pieces that shape strategy. You know, in the two ladies, Briggs-Meyer, thank you. Briggs-Meyer, mother-daughter, incredible piece of engineering to begin to understand personality types, categorize them, quantify them, and now it's in the utilization of your different personality types. I have multiple personalities, I know that for sure. And I'm very happy with them because I use them accordingly. And even with Miriam, my wife, we will say, oh, my wife, I have to go and check with my executive director, right? Or my committee. And I'll say, you know, it's the wife. Well, guess what that is? That's a red herring. And many people just don't get it. The salespeople don't get it. Why? Because they use it on us. And they think that we're not going to use it. Well, we use it to the nth degree. Part of these 5 pieces of that shape strategy is understanding what role each of you can play given a particular situation. If you're buying a car, certainly selecting a house, buying high-ticket items as opposed to everyday items. Is it important for you to be the dominant person? Just as in business. Leadership, I think even the word leadership, because of its connotations and the need then to reprogram the meaning in our minds, just like change management, doesn't optimize desired outcomes. So I replace change with replace. I'm going to replace a behavior. I'm going to walk people through a process, engage them so that the immediate pushback, the immediate psychological pushback is not heightened. If you walk into a room and say, well, we're going to do some change management today. I've said this before. Go into a kindergarten's class and you see the kids engaging. You'll see them exchanging. You'll see them discovering. You'll see them touching. So why can't we use something similar, more acceptable at first speech, at first engagement? Why don't we use better words? That's really what it's about. And we have to look for them. We may have to get a thesaurus, right? And begin to be engaged. And it's amazing how many people just feel, oh, that's too much work. Yet they'll spend their whole life digging a hole, digging themselves out of what they like, removing that passion, that love. In fact, there's a great movie about Georgia in Russia, where the people are actively repulsed by anyone that wants to do better, because their lives for generation after generation after generation are so bad. Yet there are many other nations, whether it's Haiti, whether it's Ghana, whether it's Jamaica, and many others, Venezuela even, constant turmoil. They want to do better despite the challenge, the overbearing challenge. Well, what has that got to do with today's discussion? It has everything. Because when you don't give other people a chance, they'll either dumb themselves down and out of a conversation so that you don't get the benefit of what they have to say, or they'll find other, like water, other ways of getting what they want. And as the phrase goes, I'd rather have a skunk pissing out of my tent than pissing in. Although, in the case of a skunk, it stinks anyway. Sometimes I'm driving down the road. It's 2 miles, for goodness sake, and it still smells, you know? Anyway, why do we reject knowledge? Now, this is interesting. If we have a higher level of awareness in a subject, interesting way I've said that, as opposed to if I have a master's degree or a PhD, how do we share that information? How can we get other people to identify with it? Well, first and foremost, you have to find out the knowledge that other people have. And you can do that today very readily. We've got social media. You can find out their academics without imposing on HR issues, of course. Then it's a matter of slowly feeding them and asking questions so that they give you their point of view on the topic of discussion, right? So now you have a movement together, collaboration of moving and working together. Are you ready for new think? There's another phrase here. Are you ready for new think? What you don't know, what you're not aware of. I mean, let's face it, guys. We never spoke about harnessing energy from meteorites until the last 10 years, although I'm sure they've been working on it for 50. We never discussed the fact that we might be able to use the virus AIDS to address cancer. Yet today, medicine is doing that. Those are just two very straightforward examples. Forget about artificial intelligence. That's been around for decades. That really has. In fact, here's one that kind of deals with that. We no longer care so much about the physical body with preserving a person's memories. It is the electronic synapses and what's going on upstairs that we can now put into chips. And we're working on that. So we can actually preserve those memories. So those are three examples of when we think of, are you ready for new thinking? Are we only going to accept what we can immediately understand? Or are we going to take some time to understand our new learning of physics, chemistry, biology, etc.? And interpersonal communications is that is the lowest common denominator. That's the most common element among us all. How we communicate, when we communicate, what is our objectives, what you could learn from your dry cleaner. Okay, so not exactly sure where I was going with this one, but let me see if I can do something with it. What you can learn from your dry cleaner. I think this is people that you think you come across on a daily basis. You may engage with them many ways. Because of their profession, you might think, or even your understanding of a culture, of people, you might think they don't have anything that you could benefit from. Now, notice it's all very selfish what I just said. Well, they have to help you benefit, otherwise you're not going to engage with them. Not necessarily true, because they have skill sets and a way of communicating with their family. And this is, when I say a little old school, from some immigrants to this country, their management of their children typically has more immediate response, discipline, and respect than typical Westerners. Now, as someone who, that's all I know is the West primarily. I've lived anywhere long enough to claim that I can say I understand the other cultures. I do see, though, and I think it's primarily my parents' discipline of us in a very passive way, very, very passive way, that when we don't recognize someone else's values, someone else's process of cultivating their children, engaging with one another, even the fact of people who don't have all these electronics, they're more inclined to sense uncomfort when they're speaking with someone. Whereas many of us kind of just roll down the hill with a conversation. It's like, yeah, we understand. Okay, this is what we're trying to do. We're going to get it sorted out. There's really no strategic gambit thinking behind it unless it's business, right? We just want to get things done. And is that really our lives? Is that really what we want out of our lives, out of our relationships? I think not. And of course, and I'll finish up with this one, why run up a hill? Well, why run up a hill talks about when the studies on control speech is realizing points in a relationship, certainly if someone you don't know, points in a relationship require certain acknowledgements between two or more parties. And if those acknowledgements are not made, then the relationship is not fully accepted. It's not spoken. This is not something that's going to be written up and sent to HR. This is not something that you're going to tag on your fridge and your children are going to say, Mom, you didn't do, or Dad, you forgot. This is that passive voice within us. And it certainly is very strong in families. In people we don't know, immediately we understand it, and in some cases we're almost flippant about it. But in control speech, it's really understanding, when I say something, have I prefaced it? Is the other person ready to receive it? So my relationship can be rich, our conversation can be meaningful, and the outcomes can be mutually beneficial. This is Ronald Allen, Managing Change. You know where to find me.